I think the really interesting thing is the extent to which it will tend to centralise power, and the extent to which it may actually enable power to be decentralised. I think you have technological change taking us in both those directions. In the 1950s and 1960s, the big tendency of technology, for example, in my line of business, in the press, was for it to concentrate ownership and control more and more in fewer and fewer hands because of the economies of scale of large printing presses. But now with photo setting and computerized systems and the elimination of those very expensive hot metal machines, it's modern technology has given us the opportunity to decentralize power in the press. And similarly, I understand in telecommunications, the development of microwave technology with dishes and satellites and so on enables you to get away from the kind of centralisation that you have with a wired system of the telecom kind.
Technology itself is going to be, I think, side by side with bureaucracy, with what is happening to the family, with what is happening to pressure groups, the most important single factor that is going to shape Australian and Western society.
Now, on the other hand, the good scenario is that technology is making it more and more possible for individuals to survive, or for their survival to take a smaller proportion of their time. If you're a tribesman living in central India or a peasant living in Egypt, you've got to spend 90% of your time simply surviving. We have a technology that enables us to spend a small percentage, perhaps 20–30% of our time. The rest of it we can use for the improvement of our life, to the improvement of our community and so on. So I would see that technology offers us that choice. And I'm very concerned that Australia is going the centralising route. Because of the power of bureaucracies, because of the power of the centering influences that are in our community, we are facing that way. And that's one of the reasons why I'm most interested in conservative ideology, because I think it does force people who are making apparently value-free technical choices to consider the ideological implications of what they're doing.
One of the questions worthy of investigation in a program like this is the impact of change on the party political system in Australia.
Patrick, to me you seem to be a fairly assiduous commentator on the direction political parties are taking in Australia. In your book, Lucky Country Reborn, you predicted that we'd move towards the United States model. How do you see that occurring?
I think it's still going on, Brian. I think, as I imagined then, when is it now, that's going back to 1976, that both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party will come apart. I think we're seeing this now in the friction, very keen friction between Bob Hawke and the more extreme left-wing elements of the Labor Party, the Bill Hartleys and these people. And we're seeing it too in I think it's the dilemma of the Liberal Party at the moment. It has power in Canberra and doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know where it is in New South Wales, where it's in opposition, and it doesn't exactly know where it is in Victoria, where it's in government. It got government almost by default in South Australia, and still doesn't quite know where it is. I don't know what's going to happen in the Liberal Party. But I think when we run into some turbulent years, as we will ahead, I hope we talk about them, the Liberal Party will sort of blow up, as the Labor Party is, I think, starting to do now. I could be wrong about the Labor Party. The explosion may not come immediately, but I think what we're seeing are signs of it.
That's surprising. You're saying that it's more likely in the Liberal Party than the Labor Party, and yet the Labor Party at the moment seems to be the one where the friction is public.
Oh yes, the friction is very public in the Labor Party. I think it's more internal in the Liberal Party, and they're really still, I think you could say, looking for a leader, looking for another Menzies.
Well, while Patrick Tennyson appears quite confident that there'll be major changes in our political parties over the next decade or so, we'll leave his opinion on what place he sees the new right playing or not playing in this hanging for a couple of minutes. In the meantime, how do they see their influence on the party political structure?
It's definitely there. It's slow to come through, but each time there's an election, there's a new generation of politicians come into Parliament, and although they're by no means the majority, the proportion of politicians of a sceptical bent, if you like, is much higher than it was 10 years ago.
For example, in the Liberal Party, are these the people that are called the axes in the backbench? And
Yes, I think that's true to say. There's probably 20 or 30 of them. They're probably about a third of the Liberal Party and Country Party. And even within the Labor Party you have some of this feeling, less so. They're much more attached to their socialist delusions.
In many ways, I think politicians are, in a sense, simply led by events. Things happen, they have to do something about it or be seen to be doing something about it, bearing in mind always the date of the next possible election. And this is the kind of time frame within which they operate. To a large extent, I think, therefore, it's a question of the changes in the perceptions of the people who feed ideas into politicians, the people whom politicians listen to, rather than the politicians themselves. In many ways, I think politicians are simply weather vanes. Now, the real question, therefore, is the extent to which the advisors of politicians, those to whom they talk and those to whom they listen, themselves have begun to perceive the fact that much that was possible in the past is now no longer possible, and that in the future one is going to have to deal with a number of undesired consequences, a number of undesired economic phenomena which are not going to go away because one doesn't like them, but which are going to persist and recur.
Is that going to call for a tougher breed of politician then?
I think it's going to call for a more perceptive type of politician. To a very large extent, politicians are not masters of events, they're followers.
I don't think it's quite reached the level of political parties. They're usually the last people to respond to change like this. They don't have the concepts yet to grapple with these problems. Both the Labor Party and the Liberal Party don't really know what's happening to the economy. The economic paradigms they've used in the past are just not working. They can't explain why we have inflation and recession at the same time. They can't understand why unemployment keeps increasing in spite of the tinkering that they're doing with the economy.
And I don't really foresee any major changes in the party political structure over the next 10 years. And I regret that very much, because I don't think that either major party is equipped to handle the defence, foreign policy, economic and social problems of the country. Simply because they won't take on the bureaucracy. On the other hand, the concept that some third party could arise, it's not inconceivable if there were a major accident that we can't foresee. But if you envisage a relatively prosperous society, living prosperously on mineral resources until the day of reckoning, then I don't see very much chance of a political change.
So in 1990 you see that we'll have a Liberal Party and a Labor Party much as we have today?
Unless there has been, this unless is very important to me, I simply don't believe that the change in the strategic situation in East Asia is going to permit Australia to isolate itself from the rest of the world. But short of that, if we could exclude all of those factors, and I repeat, I don't exclude them, then I don't see any major political change in this country. Life is simply too good in the purely material sense for too many people.